Right. Hi, guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Um, I was saying to Sarah just before we started that it's been a very busy week for me. Um, very busy in just kind of work. There's a lot of bustle. Um, and interestingly, now, just feeling how I feel, I just feel everything just kind of slowing down. Um, and I had the same thing this morning. I did a practice on Insight Timer earlier on today. And at the end, I spoke about the container and the container of the practice. And, entering into the container of whatever it is that I'll be doing, a meditation, a live, and really be fully wrapped in it. And kind of not all the time, but more often than not, the energy that I come into it with, I don't necessarily have when I'm in the practice. And I can just feel myself now just being in a place and space of calm. So as we wait for people to join in, let's just take some time now to just drop into that container and allow ourselves to just slow down. Just close your eyes and just stop. Just in your own time, just take pause to scan through your body from your crown, through your eyes, your nose, your jaw, your shoulders, all through your body, and just pick up where you're feeling a store of energy. Don't worry about it. Don't engage with it. Just scan and notice and acknowledge it. And just allow the morning, the afternoon, the evening, the day, the weekend to just slow down. And let your mind take you to the top of a garden path. You smell the grass, you hear the wind blow, the birds sing, the warmth of the sun. And let's just take a short walk along the path that leads to a gate. As we do that, just bring slight focus to the breath. And allow the breath to help and aid you So just slow down. Just take a deep breath in through the nose and a long exhale. In through the nose and a long exhale. Release tension from the jaw, the shoulders, the back. Find yourself in front of that gate leading into the garden. Place your hand on the handle of the gate. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Open the gate. Walk in. Close the gate behind you. Find yourself in the container of this practice. Open, present. Leave everything else outside. Take one last deep breath in and hold it at the top. And sigh it out. Open your eyes. And let's begin. So, chapter 2. And I found chapter 2 to be, again, very comforting. For those who were, maybe just didn't get a chance to kind of fully go through it, I'll just kind of offer my reflections on it. And I highlighted a few bits that I'll talk us through. And it's the beginning of, well, it's the introduction to the self. The self being essentially that core component, portion, honest, true, authentic side of ourselves. And the concept which I really related quite a lot to when I stand back and kind of reflect on my journey is just how the parts but the parts present themselves and how the various burdens that they carry end up blurring the self. And as I read chapter 2, again, like the first chapter, for me, it was really quite comforting. I use that word a lot, to just be able to trace and map my personal journey. And the realization that as I engaged more, again, inadvertently, with those different parts, I started to uncover and get closer to the self, the authentic part of me. And the outlining and explanation of how parts blend with self. So essentially, the concept being, a part will have picked up a burden based off of a situation in your past that it learned that a situation in your past that it took a learning from, and that learning being how to protect you from whatever that was, whether it was an individual, an incident, a situation, an environment. That part presented itself as either a protector, firefighter, an exile. Remind me of the last one,
Man-
Sarah.
The
A
man,
what?
manager and
Manager.
firefighters
Manager. That's it.
that are trying to protect us from
Yeah.
sorry, managers and firefighters are the protector parts that are trying to protect us from the overwhelm, or our system from the overwhelm of the pain that the exile carries from what you said, Tari, those painful experiences that we have had
Exactly.
in the past where we in ourself were not able to
Deal
protect,
with.
because when we are children, when we are small, our body is not big enough to protect us from, let's say, a abusive
An
parent.
angry parent. Mm.
Exactly. So other parts had to take over with certain strategies in order to make sure that something like that hopefully doesn't happen anymore, right? And to deal with the
Exactly.
pain. So they
Exactly.
lost trust in ourselves because we were physically too small, which doesn't mean that when we were children we didn't have a self. We had it. It was just that the situations in our life were, yeah, it was
Bigger
just
than us. Bigger
physically.
than us at the time.
Exactly. That wonderfully said, Tari. Yes.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And the self is essentially our innate essence. And Richard Schwartz talks about the 8 C's about the self, which is calm, compassionate, curious, confident. What is the other one?
I have to kind of like count to. It's
Curious, confident,
curiosity. It's
creative, connected, creative, connected, and
courageous.
courageous. Exactly. Um, Hang on. And clear. Clear is 8.
Clarity. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and again, just that comforting part about how no matter how wounded somebody is, that innate self exists and remains. And for me, that brought out a lot of hope for myself and in general. Um, and again, my my portion here in terms of kind of engaging is to really kind of reflect on how the book speaks and moves and mimics what's happened to me. And as I have engaged more with those various parts and allowed them to really and rebuilt that trust with them, that has calmed those parts down a lot, um, and really allowed me to move and engage with those exiles and really start to understand my history and my journey. Um,
Mm.
and the blending that these parts have, and Richard Schwartz talks about that, that moment when you're driving, listening to the radio, everything's going great, and someone cuts you up, and all of a sudden there's just this blind rage, and you don't know where it comes from, but it's just there. Or something or someone triggers you, and all of a sudden your week is completely engulfed and you are overwhelmed. And that is the burden that that part is carrying. And that burden has blended with self. It's not taken over self, but it's blended with self to the point where it's actually masking. It's almost like a smoke screen. And it's a smoke screen that hides the self behind. And the work and the journey is, for me, engagement. Um, and, the magic of IFS isn't really about, he talks about, sometimes even meditation can be used as a means to disconnect. Um, but that engagement with the parts to obtain and regain that trust and going through that difficulty really has brought me out onto the other side, whereby, do I no longer get overwhelmed? Of course I do. Um, it's not as sharp as it was. And quite often I kind of have to, really remind myself that, oh, hang on, that's a thing. It might not be as explosive as it was, but that's a thing. And let's look at that. And, Sarah uh, planted this question a few weeks back, and I've really taken that on board is how do I feel towards it? That feeling, that person, that situation, that environment. And that sentence has really allowed me to prepare and go deeper.
Well, that
Um,
question is really to see how much self-energy you have. This is one of the main questions that we ask clients when we are working with them to sense how much are they blended with the
yeah.
part that is coming up right now, right? Or if there is another part, meaning that, let's say I have a trigger and then I ask myself, how do I feel towards that rageful part that comes up right now during road traffic, right? And then maybe I'm like, oh, I'm annoyed by that part. Oh, okay, there's another part that is annoyed and judges the, road rage part that we might have, right? Or the part that is currently going through road rage. Um, because parts are not necessarily their afflictions or their, the emotion. That is something that they are going through, that they are feeling. And that is, their maybe go-to emotion or most present emotion that they often connect with or um, exhibit, but they're not the emotion either. And then you can see, like this is a part where this is the practice where we can unblend further, right? So, okay, when I see I have a rage part or a part that is in rage, and then I have a part that is annoyed by the part of the rage, then I can see, okay, how do I feel towards the annoyed part and see if now I can get to, some self-energy, meaning that if I can kind of understand or come into a curiosity, understanding, or compassion towards the part that is annoyed about the rageful part, then I can already see, now I'm a little bit in self. And in internal family systems, it's not about having a lot of self, but just a sliver, just a tiny bit, like a critical amount that doesn't need to be a lot, but just a little bit where we can just extend a little bit of care to one of the parts. So what I would do, I would then just go to the annoyed part and be like, "Oh, okay, I see you," and then see if it can step back. If not, I can sit with that, have a conversation. But you can already sense that there is some curiosity, some care, some connection towards that part, right? If the part that is, annoyed from the about the rageful part, um, if that one is able to step to the side a little bit, then I can come into contact with the part that feels the rage and become more curious about, hey, what is going on over here, right? Or just ask myself again, how do I feel towards that part? And then, okay, now I feel open. Okay, I feel a spaciousness and openness towards it. I'm curious. All right, this is the energy I'm leaning into when I connect with the part. I
Yeah.
that. Like, wait, yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And just that relationship and that dynamic. And for me, this is how, dare I say it and dare I call it, like how I get my certainty. Not that I'm looking for it, but the thing that, like I've said the last few weeks, what I'm really enjoying about this book is that I'm reading it on the back of already having done all of this and experienced a lot of this without knowing about it. So, the excavating of self I've experienced, you know, but I approached it from the angle of truth and throat chakra and, getting and engaging and understanding a part through that experience.
Yeah.
Um, and I spoke about ego previously. And, you know, if I scratch beneath the surface of a lot of the things that I've been doing, it's almost, you take the paint away and then you see IFS there somehow, some way. You see an engaging of a part, whether it's, blatantly as in with shadow work, or whether it's through a different medium, like, a throat chakra practice. But then, so the last part, um, for me, and then I don't know, Sarah, if you wanted to
Yeah, I want to add a few.
say anything else that you wanted to say, but for me was about the spirituality of um, all of this. And, I'm doing Charles Freelight's 83 Days of the Tao. And, we talk about the Tao, the universe, and I just love that connection of the self and that spiritual aspect and spiritual element to it. Yeah. Anyways, that's it. I've now got the questions. So, Deborah, right, I see your comment. If you grew up with an angry parent, you likely developed a part that made themselves small and still does this today. Exactly. Exactly. It's, dare we call it? It's a defense mechanism that the part has taken on. There's a situation that it needed to take control over to protect the individual. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but parts don't necessarily have to have come or started as children. You know, um, I believe that there's some parts that started with me in my teenage and in my 20s. I don't know.
Have you seen the
Technically,
film Inside Out?
you and Inside Out.
I strongly suggest you watch it because it's all about parts. And there's like a sequel that came out like 10 years later after the first one came out.
Yeah.
And the first one is about a small child and their parts. And I think she had like five parts. And they moved. They moved to a different city, and that was really hard for her. So you could see the internal perspective from how the parts were, like, reacting to that. But she always had those parts. And then 10 years later, the sequel had more parts because she was a teenager and some more parts came. And that's
Mm,
actually true.
mm,
This is something that has been observed. with parts work that we can have different ages of different parts and parts that are coming up when we are like in the book, it also says actually in this chapter that we are born with parts, and when you have a child, you can see them rotating through 5 or 6 parts, throughout the day or a few days, and that's just, they're parts. And later on, you have some more parts when you are developing further. Yeah.
And you know what, actually? Sorry, go on.
Yes, George, I love that movie. Inside Out is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I can attest to that,
A
George.
little bit.
Inside Out is a
Yes.
big she's a big fan of Inside Out.
I had to bring that
um,
in here because it's just such a good film. By the way, to the thing that you just said before about, um, parts taking on roles due to hardships in our early lives, right? I love what Richard Schwartz wrote in the book. And he says that parts are little inner beings who are trying their best to keep you safe. So, what if we approached all parts that we have within us just from that perspective, right? Even if we find, a part that is having a very strong um, behavior or impulse or um, belief, right? That we can not come to the conclusion, but see it from the perspective of this is just the way they're trying to keep us safe, and this is their good intention. Even though the way they are doing it might not be, you know, the best way or the most helpful way. But I think this also helps to get us, for me, when I read those books or those texts or quotes, it really helps me access a little bit more self, because then I come into a compassion and understanding and open up to the part where I can be curious and not see it as something or become less blended with a part that, you know, thinks, oh, it's annoying, I need to fix myself out of this.
mm,
Yeah, I have those parts.
yeah, no, agreed. And going through that, it's one of my to go onto my list of many to do things. You spoke about in Inside Out the infant having the child having 5 parts. I'd be quite interested to look into, and it's probably there. You can tell me about how to engage with an actual child and their parts.
The same like you would do with your parts. Or what is your question?
No, 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 no. I mean, I'm saying keep going. I think as a parent, and there's potentially parents on here as well. Like I, with hindsight, would have loved to know what I know about parts and IFS when I was younger. And I'm just intrigued to kind of capture how you engage with the child on that. So you say, like, just talk me through your answer just now. What do you mean? Well, I know what you mean, but just yeah.
Well, when I am in a relationship, when I'm in connection with my part, right? The way I talk to that part it's just the way how I would talk to a child. Is
But
that
the child doesn't necessarily, or maybe the child does realize that there's different parts part of it.
Oh, you mean when
That's
it
my point. How do you engage with the various parts in a child? That's what I mean.
I'm not sure I understand your question, but I have a nephew and
Yeah.
has a part that is sometimes really angry and comes up really a lot. And I would just either create direct access to that part and speak directly to the part so the child is blended with that part, right? It doesn't realize that it has self. And I would talk to that part like I would talk to my own maybe angry part and see what happens. I just make sure that I am in self. I just ask myself, how do I feel towards
Mm,
my nephew and that part that is up right now? And then from that place of spaciousness and curiosity and compassion, I connect with it. And when I'm in self, I intuitively know because I'm connected, I'm attuned to the child and that part. I intuitively know and sense what it needs, or I ask it. I just come into a very understanding and curious and compassionate relationship with it.
mm,
What you can also do is you can talk to the child. So, oh, I see you have an angry part come up, and
mm.
introduce the parts line
Use the word.
child. So the child realizes, yes, I have that angry part. Well, tell me, what does it want to tell us?
Mm, mm.
Share. And then says something maybe like, well, I don't want to do that. I'm scared. And, like dad's forcing me to do that, but I'm scared. It's like, okay. So, then you can, I don't know, like whatever the issue,
Yeah, no,
right?
no. I
I don't know. I don't have an example right now, but then you can say, okay, I see that you're scared of that and you feel pressured into it. Yeah, okay. So what do you think would happen if you did that? Right?
mm,
And I was like, well, I might get hurt. Okay, well, maybe dad can hold you or I can hold you. We can help you. We're there, like you're not alone. You don't have to hold that alone. And I was like, okay, maybe I can try. Well, we can just try, just one little step. If you don't feel like it, we'll stop it. Like it's all good, right? This is
mm,
the conversation you're having with your parts,
mm,
parts with the child, or with the child when you're in direct access with the part of the child.
mm. I like that.
Mhm.
Oh, exactly. And it's, for me, there there's a whole thing to unwrap there. But yeah,
Shall
yeah.
I shall I make a session with you?
I think let's book a session next
I'm
week.
kidding. Kidding.
Yeah, no, Deborah, yeah, you're right. Maybe exactly. Emphasize and let your child know that you have parts too, and everyone does, and that's okay to acknowledge those parts and let them feel through their feelings. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And that is a nice segue and lead into the exercise.
Yes. So we said we were going to do the exercise or the second exercise from chapter 1. Right, Tari?
Yes, we are.
Did
Mapping of our
I get that
parts.
right? It's about mapping your parts. Exactly. So for this exercise, I would give you some time, just a few minutes, to get something to write, pen and paper, maybe your journal or a bigger sheet of paper where you have a bit more room to map your parts. If you want, you can also get some, I don't know, colors. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be an artwork. It can also be just notes, scribbles. Sometimes I also just write down what parts they are and I don't draw them. Sometimes I draw them. Yeah, so I will give you some time and I will see if I actually have an example to quickly show you how that
What it looks like.
would look like, just as an example. It doesn't have to look like how I do it, but it might actually give you a little bit of an idea. So while you're grabbing your thing and getting settled, I'll do the same. Let's see if I have it somewhere. So it's in German, you probably cannot really read it. It's probably quite small anyway. But this is basically how it could look like. Like I just did a little something and wrote some notes how I experienced that part, how it shows up, what emotions or thoughts or beliefs it has, just what it kind of like tells me or shows me. I have another, I don't know, it's really small, but from another exercise where uh, does it work? Where it's more like this, where you have like, where is it? Like it says the hate are arrows on top. Let me just change that one quickly. Where is this? Let me get out of this. There we go. Um, so where it's noted a little bit different. So the arrows are hate, and then the cloud are concerns or fears. And then at the very bottom, there is something, a sensitive part. And underneath that, you can barely see it, there is a dot that is fear, right? So it can also be kind of like in layers like that, for example. So it really doesn't matter how you want to draw it. It just needs to be something that works for you in whatever way it is. Or if you just don't even want to draw it and just want to write it. All right, you might want to settle in. If it helps to close your eyes, you can close your eyes for a moment. And then just take a few deep breaths. Now, I invite you to think of a situation that might be currently happening or has recently happened or is something a little bit in the past where you know it's been a little bit difficult or you could feel some emotions or maybe some slight triggers or stuckness around that situation or the person that you were in that situation with. Just see if something comes to your mind. It doesn't have to be something big, it can also be something small. Just see if you have a situation. Maybe you have a few. If you have a few, then you can see if one of those feels more present than the others. Now, once you have a situation, just picture yourself for a brief moment in there, in that scene. How did it look like? What was happening? And notice any thoughts, sensations, emotions, maybe impulses or behaviors that were coming up within you during that moment. And then see if one of them stands out most. see if you can maybe become a little bit more clearer picture of what we call the part. And just sense into what it's feeling or doing or thinking. The goal is to really observe it and just get to know it a little bit. And once you have a sense of that part, its behaviors, you can grab your pen and write down. Write it down or draw it. If you feel that this part might seem to have some conflicting or polarizing thoughts or saying different things, might be that you're having similar parts at the same time. Just sense into that and see if other parts might want to step back for a moment. We'll get to them later so that you can focus on the original part you're focusing on at the beginning. So, shall I move to the second part? How do you feel? Tara is nodding. Okay. So, it was likely that when you were focusing at the beginning of the exercise, that you probably also sensed some other parts. It's also likely that when you were focusing on the first part, that there were maybe other voices, maybe some polarizing parts that don't agree with it, or parts that are siding with it. So I want you to turn your focus inward and see what other part wants to reveal itself now. And then do the same process with that one. Getting to know it. You can say, hey, I'm here. What do you want me to know? How does it look like? What is it saying? What is it feeling? What is it afraid of or concerned about? Just get a bit of a sense of what it is, how it shows up, or who it is. And then you can put it down on paper again. And I will let you do the process in your own timing. So once you are finished with that part, you have it on paper, you can turn inside again or inwards again, and then just sense which other part comes up now, wants to be seen and tell me something. And then you go on with that part into the process, and then the next one, and the next one. If at some point it becomes difficult for you to see the parts clearly, maybe you want to imagine yourself back in the situation that we started with or that you started with, and sense what else is coming up there. Or you can also ask the part that is blocking you from seeing the other parts, what that one is afraid of, what happened, and draw or write that one down on your sheet of paper, because this is likely also a part that wants us to distract from seeing more of what is going on within us. And if at any point one part is really blocking the view, you can just spend some time with that part. You can ask it to step aside if it doesn't want to. Then you're just gonna be with it and ask it some questions to learn a little bit more about it. whenever you're ready, thank your parts for revealing themselves to you. Let them know that this will not be the last time you checked in with them, that you will be back. And whenever you are ready, you can come back to us. If you need more time, take that time. There's no need to rush. Really listen to your parts, tend to them. If you have any insights or questions, feel free to post them if you want. I'm curious if you have any questions.
I'm gonna have to circle back.
Mm-hmm.
There's something which came up, which is quite recent and recurring,
Mm-hmm.
which I want to really engage with and on. But yeah, even just that little short moment has allowed, yeah, has allowed the identifying of certain things. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to add something to this exercise. We are not entirely done yet, but we are done with the introspection. Now, if you look at your parts map, you might also sense that those parts have relationships with each other. And what I did on my map and what I encourage people to do is to draw arrows of the relationship they have with each other. It can be that certain parts are in polarization, right, against each other. It could be also that some parts are supporting each other. They're like clusters of parts that have the same not intention, but the same way of going on about it, or the same way of protecting you, just in slightly different ways. For example, my inner critic and my perfectionist, they're like best buddies. Right? They can be quite close. So what you can do is you can draw arrows like I did over here. Let's be back again. Like I did here, to see in what relationship they are with each other. So which one is affecting which part, and how does that part react to the other part again, so that we can get a little bit a clearer sense of how they are interacting with each other in your system or as a system within you. We had some questions from Amy. So the
Yeah.
first one, Amy asked, how do you know if it's a protective part or an exile? The protective parts usually, there can also be some exiled protectors, but usually protective parts aim to fix, control, or numb in order to not feel the overwhelming pain or emotion or sadness, loneliness, whatever it is, from the exile. The exile often holds very strong beliefs about itself, basically. can be shame, I am not good enough, I'm bad, I'm not lovable, right? There's something wrong with me. And the protective parts are the parts that are trying to deal with that, being either through managing, you know, making you strive for perfection, or the inner critic who is driving you to be better as well, right? Or through firefighters who are mostly coming up when the emotion of the exile is coming to the surface and it needs to extinguish that quote unquote, I should say pain or whatever it is that the exile is feeling. It needs to now extinguish that because it's already coming to the surface, right? The manager, the controlling part, is trying to not let it come to the surface in the first place. Now, when it is still coming to the surface, a lot of times firefighters would step in and try to put out the fire through things like dissociation or numbing, in whatever way it is doing that, right? It can be consuming certain, I don't know, overconsumption of food even, or binge watching Netflix is also one of them, right? Just to kind of like, I don't want to look at what I'm feeling. I want to get away from it. Or it can also be deflecting, you know, like the rage, the road rage is often something that is we're blaming someone else instead of looking at, hey, what is going on within me, right?
Mm.
So this is one way where we can really distinguish between, okay, you know, like the roles that they play, the roles that the parts play can give you a little bit an insight on whether they are protectors or an exile. The exile usually doesn't try to do anything. It can be also a depressed part that is just kind of like woof, really down, right? Um, yeah. And then there are also protectors that are exiled. So this is another part where, you know, like certain protectors who want to do something, they were, and that was not safe to do, they were then pushed aside and they became exiled too. So you can also have protectors that are exiled.
Yeah.
So I wonder, it's helpful to ask if they have a job, if they, yes, that's exactly, that's a good one. I forgot that one. If they
Mm.
do, they're probably a protector. If they don't, you could ask if they're stuck somewhere. Then they are probably an exile vulnerable part. Exactly. Yeah. This is how you would go about it. This is a how to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Sarah. Um, that's very helpful for me. And I think, for me in kind of closing, I find it really helpful to have the book and also the conversation with you and also guys in the group to really engage and understand more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, next week, um, we will be looking at, I actually think maybe next week we do a couple of exercises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, either which way, if you haven't read chapter two, do read chapter two. Um, we'll we'll kind of look at that again next week as well, and just maybe circle back to a few other exercises as well. The exercises from chapter two, because these are chapter one exercises, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. There's a unblending and embodying exercise in chapter 2.
Yeah.
Only one though. There's not another one. No, there's not. But I can
Yeah. So we'll look at that.
do that.
Okay.
But maybe.
Anything in closing from you, Miss Kartika?
No, it's been a very, very good
Mm.
session. I'm very
Good.
grateful to everyone who showed up and shared their insights. So, and their questions. So,
Wonderful. Thank you. everybody. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to my parts, your parts, our parts for full stop. We'll see you all next week. Have a good week and enjoy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.